The shadow of extinction. The Meridian Collective had ruled the galaxy without challenge for 300 standard cycles. Their dominance was absolute. 7 species united under a single banner, their combined technologies and resources making them unstoppable. From the sprawling gas-harvesting rings of Altair to the crystal metropolises on Cygni Prime, their influence was written across the stars themselves. Commander Ezra Khalil stood at the observation deck of the collective flagship Eternal Dominance, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he gazed at the dead world below. The planet, designated only as DX-479, hung in space like a discarded relic, its surface scarred by ancient wars, its atmosphere long since stripped away. According to the archives, it had once been a human colony. Humans. Khalil whispered the word with a mixture of fascination and dismissal. The species was little more than a footnote in galactic history now, a promising race that had expanded too quickly, challenged the wrong powers, and subsequently vanished from the cosmic stage. Their remnants were scattered across dozens of forgotten worlds like this one, silent monuments to their brief existence. Commander, we found something unusual in the Northern Hemisphere. Lieutenant Voss's voice crackled through his neural implant. The Toraxi officer's tone carried an edge of excitement that was unusual for her species. You should see this immediately. The descent shuttle carved through the planet's thin atmosphere with barely a tremor. Khalil watched through the viewport as they approached a massive structure partially buried beneath the planet's surface, a complex that had somehow escaped previous surveys of the world. How was this missed? Khalil demanded, his outer eyelids narrowing. Unknown, Commander, Voss replied, her scaled fingers dancing across the control panel. But preliminary scans indicate it's been actively shielded. Something is still functioning down there after all this time. The landing was smooth, the shuttle touching down on a flat plateau near the structure's entrance. Khalil led the exploration team personally, his environment suit humming softly as it adjusted to the planet's negligible atmospheric pressure. The entrance to the facility was massive, easily 20 meters high, with symbols etched into the surface in a language the universal translator struggled to process. Human script, confirmed Voss after a moment. An older dialect, but translatable. It says, Vanguard Station Alpha. Authorized personnel only. Khalil felt a chill run through his spine, despite his suit's temperature regulations. Vanguard. There's no mention of any Vanguard program in the historical archives about humanity. Perhaps it was classified. Offered Science Officer Mira, the team's Solari member, her luminescent skin pulsing slightly with interest. The humans were known for their compartmentalized military structures. The facility's main doors were sealed, but they yielded to the collective's advanced decryption tools after only a few minutes, a surprising weakness for such an apparently important installation. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the team's lights as they moved deeper into the complex. Power signatures are increasing, Voss noted, checking her scanner. Something ahead is active, has been active for centuries, drawing energy from. I can't identify the source. They emerged into a vast chamber dominated by a spherical structure suspended in the center. It hung there, completely motionless, approximately 3 meters in diameter, its surface a deep obsidian that seemed to swallow their lights rather than reflect them. What is it? Khalil breathed, approaching cautiously. Before anyone could respond, the sphere pulsed once. A grid of blue light suddenly spread across its surface, followed by a holographic projection that filled the chamber. It showed the galaxy, but not as it currently existed. This was the galaxy of centuries past, with human territories marked in green across what was now collective space. A voice spoke, causing everyone to freeze. It was calm, measured, and utterly confident. Vanguard Outpost Alpha reactivation sequence initiated. Detecting non-human biological signatures. Warning, this facility is the property of the Terran Defense Initiative. Unauthorized access will be reported to the Vanguard fleet. Khalil felt his blood run cold. Vanguard fleet? What Vanguard fleet? The humans have been gone for centuries. The sphere pulsed again, and the hologram shifted, showing a trajectory cutting through deep space, far beyond the galaxy's outer rim. Message relay activated, transmitting status update to Vanguard fleet. Current position, Dark Space Sector 17. Estimated arrival time at Collective Core Worlds, 94 standard days. The exploration team exchanged glances of confusion and growing alarm. Mira stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. This must be an automated response. There can't actually be a human fleet out there, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. The historical records would have mentioned. Historical records are incomplete, the sphere interrupted, as if it had been listening and understanding. The Vanguard Protocol was enacted as final contingency. When the Meridian Alliance began systematic attacks on human outer colonies, the Terran Defense Council authorized Operation Distant Thunder. The Vanguard fleet was dispatched beyond the galaxy to ensure human survival, regardless of the outcome of the war. Khalil felt his respiratory chambers constrict. The Meridian Alliance? That was the predecessor to our collective. But the official history states that humans attacked first and were subsequently defeated in a defensive action. The sphere seemed to rotate slightly, its blue grid intensifying. Historical revision detected, uploading accurate war archives to your systems. Suddenly, Khalil's neural implant was flooded with data, thousands of records, images, and recordings showing a very different version of the conflict that had supposedly ended humanity. Not a defensive action, but a calculated extermination campaign. Not a just victory, but a genocide obscured by centuries of propaganda. This can't be true, he whispered, even as the evidence poured through his mind. The collective stands for peace and unity. The collective was built on the ashes of worlds, the sphere replied. And now the survivors return. The Vanguard fleet approaches. Humanity comes to reclaim what was taken. Voss's scanner suddenly emitted a high-pitched alarm. Commander, the sphere is transmitting on multiple frequencies, extremely powerful signals directed toward deep space. I can't block it. Shut it down, Khalil ordered, panic edging into his voice. Shut everything down now. But it was too late. The damage was done. As the exploration team retreated from the facility, the sphere's final message echoed through the chamber. Transmission complete. The Vanguard has been awakened. Earth's children are coming home. 3 weeks later, the Collective High Council gathered in emergency session on the capital world of Meridius Prime. The chamber was filled with the representatives of all 7 species, their voices raised in a cacophony of argument and fear. High Chancellor Ixeris, the ancient Drovian who had led the collective for 40 cycles, raised his gnarled hands for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, all eyes turning to Commander Khalil, who stood in the center of the room. Your report has caused considerable distress, Commander, Ixeris said, his voice rasping through his breathing apparatus. You claim that a long-extinct species is about to emerge from deep space with a fleet of unknown capabilities. Khalil stood firm. The evidence is incontrovertible, Chancellor. The Vanguard station's transmissions have been verified by multiple listening posts. Something is approaching from beyond the galactic rim, and it's moving at speeds our technology cannot match. Preposterous, spat Councillor Thrix, the Hedgeran representative. Even if a few human ships somehow escaped our ancestors' justice, they would be primitive relics by now. 3 centuries in deep space would leave them technologically obsolete and likely their crew dead generations ago. Khalil activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing the trajectory of the approaching fleet. With respect, Counselor, we don't know what technology they possessed. The data from the Vanguard station suggests they were already developing experimental propulsion and stasis technologies before their apparent defeat, and the speed of the approaching vessels indicates advancements far beyond what we currently possess. The council chamber erupted into another round of arguments. Khalil watched them with growing unease. These were the leaders of the most powerful political entity in known space, Yet they were reacting with denial and dismissal to what might be the greatest threat they had ever faced. Only Admiral Vela, the head of the collective defense force, seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. The tall, silver-skinned Atlan rose from her seat, silencing the chamber with her authoritative presence. "We would be fools to dismiss this warning," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I have analyzed Commander Kalil's findings personally. If even half of what the Vanguard station transmitted is accurate, we must prepare for the possibility of confronting a technologically advanced human fleet within the next 50 days. Chancellor Xeris's expression darkened. "What do you propose, Admiral?" "We mobilize the Grand Fleet immediately, every battle-capable vessel, every defense platform. We establish a defensive perimeter at the projected arrival coordinates, and we prepare to negotiate from a position of strength." The chamber fell silent, the magnitude of the recommendation sinking in. The Grand Fleet had not been fully mobilized in over a century. "And if negotiation fails?" asked Xeris. Admiral Vela's expression hardened. "Then we finish what our ancestors started." As the council session concluded, Kalil found himself standing alone on one of the capital's observation platforms, watching the setting sun cast long shadows across the gleaming city. The beauty of the scene felt at odds with the dread pooling in his gut. His neural implant chimed softly, indicating a secure communication. It was Admiral Vela. "Commander, your discovery has set events in motion that cannot be undone." Her voice was grim in his mind. "The Defense Force is mobilizing, but I fear the Council still doesn't truly believe in the threat." "What can I do, Admiral?" Kalil asked. "Return to DX-479. Learn everything you can about this Vanguard protocol. If humanity truly is returning, we need to understand what we're facing." As Kalil's shuttle left the capital world the next morning, he could already see the increased military activity in orbit, ships being reactivated, crews being assembled. The collective was preparing for war, even if reluctantly. But as his vessel accelerated toward the forgotten human world, a single question haunted him. After centuries of absence, what kind of humanity would be returning to the stars? And what vengeance would they seek for the sins of the past? The awakening storm. Admiral Helena Chen stood on the command deck of the TSV Horizon, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing their approach to the Milky Way. After 300 years in deep space, the familiar spiral of their home galaxy filled her with emotions she had long since learned to suppress. "Status report," she said, her voice calm despite the momentous occasion. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," replied her executive officer. "Commander Jackson. The fleet is maintaining formation. 87 vessels, all systems nominal. Crew revival completed across all ships with minimal complications." Chen nodded. The Vanguard fleet, humanity's last hope, dispatched 3 centuries ago, when defeat seemed inevitable, had accomplished what many had thought impossible. They had survived, they had evolved. And now they were returning. "And the Vanguard stations?" she asked. 7 have responded to our signal. 3 remain unaccounted for." Jackson's expression tightened. "The responding stations confirm our worst fears. The Meridian Alliance has transformed into something called the Collective. They've expanded to control approximately 70% of what used to be human space." Chen's jaw clenched momentarily, the only outward sign of the anger that flashed through her. "And the historical records, what do they tell their people about us?" "That we were aggressors who received justified retribution, that humanity was a violent species that needed to be contained, that we provoked our own extinction." A bitter smile touched Chen's lips. How convenient for them. She turned away from the display, facing the assembled officers on the bridge. These men and women, along with the 30,000 other humans aboard the Vanguard fleet, were the descendants of those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. They had left a dying Earth, not knowing if they would ever return, carrying with them the genetic material to rebuild humanity and the determination to ensure its survival. "We are 93 hours from our first contact with collective space," Chen announced. "Begin final preparations. I want all ships ready for both diplomatic engagement and combat operations." As the officers dispersed to their duties, Chen remained alone at the viewport, staring at the approaching galaxy. When the fleet had departed Earth, they had been desperate refugees fleeing a losing war. Their ships had been hastily assembled, their technology experimental, their future uncertain. Now they returned with vessels that had been upgraded and refined over generations in deep space. The Vanguard fleet had not merely survived their long exile. They had thrived, developing technologies that Earth scientists had only dreamed of before the fall. "Admiral," Jackson's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving a transmission from the edge of collective space. They know we're coming." Chen straightened her uniform. "Put it through." The holographic display shifted, revealing the four-eyed visage of a Meridian, one of the species that had led the coalition against humanity centuries ago. Chen felt a cold anger stir in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. "This is Commander Isra Khalil of the Meridian Collective Defense Force," the alien began. "You are approaching collective territory with a fleet of unidentified vessels. State your identity and intentions immediately." Chen stepped forward, her posture perfect, her gaze unwavering. "This is Admiral Helena Chen of the Terran Vanguard Fleet. We represent the continuation of human civilization, and we have returned to reclaim what is rightfully ours." She could see the shock register on the alien's face, shock not just at her words, but at her very existence. To him, humans were supposed to be extinct, a problem solved long ago. "Admiral Chen," Khalil recovered quickly, "your arrival is unexpected. The Collective High Council requests a diplomatic meeting before your fleet advances further. We have no desire for conflict." "No desire for conflict," Chen repeated, a cold edge entering her voice. "That's not what the historical records recovered from our Vanguard stations indicate. They tell a very different story about your collective's formation and its relationship with humanity." Khalil's expression shifted subtly. "History is complex, Admiral. Perspectives differ. But what matters now is the present. The galaxy has changed in your absence. The collective has brought peace and stability to countless worlds." "Peace built on genocide," Chen replied. "But I'm not here to debate history, Commander. A diplomatic meeting is acceptable. Transmit the coordinates. My ships will maintain position until then." As the transmission ended, Jackson approached her. "You're actually considering negotiation, Admiral, after everything they did to Earth." Chen turned to him, her eyes hard. "We gather information, Commander. We assess their strengths and weaknesses, and then we decide how to proceed." The Vanguard protocol was clear. We return not just for vengeance, but to ensure humanity's permanent place among the stars. How we achieve that goal remains flexible. 2 days later, the diplomatic summit convened aboard a collective station at the edge of their territory. Admiral Chen led a small delegation, their sleek shuttle docking with the massive station that served as the meeting ground. The collective representatives waited in a grand chamber, representatives of all 7 member species arranged in a semicircle. At their center stood Chancellor Xeris, the wizened Rovian leader, flanked by Commander Khalil and Admiral Vela. "Admiral Chen," Xeris began, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard human speech. "Your return is unprecedented. We had believed humanity lost to history." Chen stood before them, acutely aware that she represented not just her fleet but the entire human species. Lost, Chancellor, or deliberately erased. She activated a small device on her wrist, projecting images into the center of the chamber, recordings recovered from the Vanguard stations showing the systematic bombardment of human colonies, the execution of surrendered forces, the deliberate destruction of civilian evacuation ships. "Our history records a defensive action against human aggression," Xeris said, though his confidence seemed diminished by the explicit imagery. "And yet the evidence suggests otherwise," Chen replied coldly. "But I'm not here to litigate the past. I'm here to determine the future. What exactly do you want? Admiral Vela asked directly, her military pragmatism cutting through the diplomatic facade. We want what was taken from us, Chen said simply. Territory, resources, recognition, the right to exist without fear of another attempted extermination. The collective representatives shifted uncomfortably. It was Khalil who spoke next, surprising his own delegation. The collective of today is not the alliance of 3 centuries ago, Admiral. Many of us had no knowledge of these historical inaccuracies. What you're asking would require massive territorial concessions and redistribution of established worlds. Yes, Chen agreed without hesitation. It would. Impossible, spat one of the representatives, a reptilian Sergal. We will not surrender what has been collective territory for centuries based on ancient grievances. Chen smiled thinly. I don't recall offering you a choice. The chamber erupted in outrage, but Chen simply raised her hand, activating her wrist device again. This time, the projection showed the Vanguard fleet in formation, but now it revealed what had been hidden until this moment. Beyond the 87 vessels that had announced their approach were hundreds more, emerging from stealth configurations, a vast armada that dwarfed anything the collective could mobilize. 3 centuries ago, humanity faced extinction, Chen said calmly over the shocked silence. We learned our lesson. We will never be vulnerable again. The diplomatic summit concluded without resolution, each side retreating to prepare for what seemed an inevitable conflict. As Chen returned to her flagship, she found Commander Jackson waiting with an update. The collective fleet is mobilizing. Admiral, nearly 2,000 vessels moving to defensive positions along their border. They're taking us seriously now. Chen nodded. As they should. Prepare the demonstration force. Let's show them exactly what they're facing. 3 days later, the Galaxy witnessed a battle unlike any in recorded history. The collective launched a preemptive strike against what they believed was the vanguard of the human fleet, a force of 30 ships that had advanced slightly ahead of the main formation. What followed could hardly be called a battle. It was a demonstration. The human vessels absorbed the collective's most powerful weapons with shields that barely flickered. They moved with impossible speed, their propulsion systems defying known physics, and when they returned fire, their weapons cut through the collective's most advanced defenses as if they were paper. Within 20 minutes, 40 collective warships had been disabled without a single human casualty. The remaining collective forces retreated in disarray, their commanders unable to comprehend the technological gap they faced. On the command deck of the Horizon, Admiral Chen watched the aftermath with grim satisfaction. Transmit to all collective frequencies, she ordered. I want to speak to their leadership directly. When the connection was established, she faced not only Chancellor Xeris, but what appeared to be the entire collective High Council, their expressions ranging from fear to rage. Consider that a demonstration, Chen said without preamble. A small fraction of our capabilities employed by a small fraction of our fleet. We could continue this conflict and systematically dismantle your collective piece by piece, or we can negotiate terms that acknowledge humanity's right to exist in this galaxy alongside you. The choice is yours, but I recommend you choose quickly. The council chamber on the other end erupted into frantic discussion. Chen cut the transmission, giving them time to absorb the reality of their situation. Will they surrender? Jackson asked, standing at her side. Chen shook her head. Not surrender. They're too proud, and their empire too vast. But they'll negotiate now. They've seen enough to know they can't win a direct confrontation. And if negotiations fail, Chen turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the stars outside the viewport. Then humanity reclaims its place by force. But that would be a Pyrrhic victory at best. We didn't come all this way, survive all these centuries, just to become conquerors. We came to ensure our survival. The negotiations that followed lasted weeks, conducted aboard a neutral station in unclaimed space. The galaxy held its breath as the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. Gradually, a new order began to emerge. The collective would cede significant territories to the returning humans, primarily worlds that had once been human colonies and several uninhabited systems with valuable resources. A demilitarized zone would separate human space from collective territory. Most importantly, humanity would be recognized as a sovereign power with equal standing to the collective itself. When Admiral Chen signed the final agreement, she felt the weight of 3 centuries of exile finally lifting. It wasn't perfect. Many in her fleet had wanted more concessions, even total victory over those who had nearly destroyed their species. But Chen understood something fundamental about humanity's return that many of her people had yet to grasp. "We didn't come back to repeat the mistakes of the past," she told her officers afterward. "We came back to build a future." In the months that followed, human ships began the process of reclaiming their ancestral worlds. Seeds and genetic samples preserved for centuries were used to reestablish Earth's lost biodiversity on suitable planets. The Vanguard fleet, designed to be self-sufficient for generations, began the transition from a nomadic armada to the foundation of a new human civilization. Commander Kahlo, who had been central to the negotiations from the collective side, found himself appointed as the primary liaison to the newly established human territories. As he stood beside Admiral Chen on the surface of New Terra, the first world formally recolonized by returning humanity, he finally asked the question that had haunted him since their first meeting. "Your technology," he said carefully, "it's centuries beyond what we possess, beyond what humanity should have been capable of developing, even accounting for 300 years of advancement." "How?" Chen looked out at the settlement taking shape across the valley below. "Humanity's new beginning. When faced with extinction, Commander, you'd be surprised what becomes possible. The greatest minds of a species, united by a singular purpose, unbound by the constraints of established thinking. That's a force more powerful than any weapon." She turned to him, her expression severe but not unkind. "Remember that, when you report back to your council. Humanity doesn't seek dominance or revenge for its own sake. But we will never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We paid too high a price for that lesson." As the twin suns set on New Terra, the first children born on human soil in 3 centuries played in the shadow of the colony's protective shields. They were the first generation of humans who would know neither Earth nor exile, only the future that their ancestors had traveled across the void to secure. The silent vanguard had fulfilled its purpose. Humanity had returned to claim its place among the stars, not with conquest alone, but with the same determination and innovation that had allowed them to survive against impossible odds. The galaxy would never be the same again.